take us through the process. Today, I want to adopt a kid.
Okay.
I don't have an idea where to go.
Right.
Just
Okay.
get me what to do.
All right. So you want to adopt a child. First, you have to understand what this means. So adoption basically is the acquiring of parental responsibilities over a child. This is from the child's biological parents or a legal guardian that is in place. So once you understand this, now you can move on to the next step. You need to know who can adopt a child. Okay. First of all, in the new act, in the Children's Act 2022, there are different people who can adopt. We can start with a married couple can apply to adopt jointly. The second person who qualifies to adopt is a sole female applicant. The next person who qualifies to adopt is a sole male applicant, provided that the child that they are adopting is a blood relative. So, yes, now that is one of the provisions that came with the new act. So if it's
a male can't adopt even a boy? I thought it was
previously, yes, previously in the Children's Act 2001, a male applicant could adopt a male child. Now, only a blood relative. The other person who qualifies to adopt is a person married to the biological parent of the child. Let's say you married someone and that person came into the marriage with a child. Sometimes you find families want this, that the other parent's name to be captured in this child's birth certificate. So in order to do this, you have to adopt this child legally. So a spouse can qualify to adopt. When you are adopting someone else's child, remember this child has a biological maybe mother or father out there. So this mother or father out there has to give consent for this child to be adopted. Where there is no consent, this can be dispensed with by the court. So if this parent is never bothered with this child, has neglected this child, then the court will dispense with this consent. All the above who we've listed have to be at least 25 years of age. At least 25 years to adopt the child, and should not be older than 65 years old. You're not too old and you're not too young. The other provision is that even this child that you're adopting, you have to be at least 21 years older than this child. The age gap has to be 21 years. Now, the thing to note about this requirement is that when it is a relative of the child that's adopting this child, or a mother or a father, then this does not apply. This age thing does not apply to kinship, okay? Again, we've said that the parent should not be older than 65 years old. The court, given the circumstances, can do away with this requirement. Let's say there's exceptional circumstances where you find a grandmother needs to adopt this child. The grandmother is older, or even let's say it's not the grandmother, it's just a person who is capable of taking care of this child, and it is in the best interest, again, of this child to be adopted by an individual who's 65 years old or older. You'll apply to the court, and then the court will consider your circumstances and then decide whether or not to allow this adoption. To successfully adopt, you need to know whom can adopt and who can be adopted. Okay? So now we look at the case of children. Now, a child who can be adopted is a child who is a resident in Kenya, whether or not this child is a Kenyan citizen. So as long as the child is in Kenya, the child qualifies to be adopted. This child has to be below the age of 18 years to be adopted, but should be at least 6 weeks old. Okay? Okay, the other child who can be adopted is a child who has been abandoned. This child qualifies to be adopted. Again, a child who is an orphan. So in a situation whereby the child does not have a legal guardian or a caregiver, that child qualifies to be adopted. The other child who qualifies to be adopted is a child who has been willingly been given up for adoption. So you find the mother has, considered her situation and circumstances and decides to freely give up this child for adoption. So those are the children that qualify to be adopted. Now you've known who can adopt, what is adoption, who can adopt, who can be adopted. Now you move on to the next step, and that is to now, if you want to adopt, you approach an adoption society. You don't go to the children's home, you don't go, to your relative, to where you first go to an adoption society. This is the first place you need to go. So when you approach an adoption society,
like, 3 of them in Kenya?
Yes, registered ones, yeah. Yeah, you need to approach a registered adoption society, okay? So once you approach the adoption society, you make an application by way of a letter. In this letter, you inform them of your intention to adopt a child. You also inform them of your motivation, what motivates you to adopt this child, and also maybe what you are looking for. Maybe you're looking for a child that's 6 months old, or maybe a child that's 2 years old. You inform them of all these things in this application. So the adoption society, after receiving this application, will request for certain documents. Let's say your identification card. In cases where they are joint applicants, they'll ask for a marriage certificate and any other relevant documents that they may require. Once this is done, they will now set up an interview for assessment. The purpose of this assessment is to figure out whether this applicant or the applicants qualify to adopt. So once this assessment is done, the next thing that they do is they do a home visit. So they come see where you're staying, whether the environment is conducive to bringing up a child. And once this is done, there's usually a case committee from the adoption society that sits and discuss the findings of these assessments, and also to confirm whether you're fit for adoption and before you can proceed to the next stage. Now you've been assessed, the committee has discussed your case, and they have approved you and deemed you fit for adoption. The next step is matching. Matching is whereby they match. Remember, you've written what you need, the age of the child, all those things. So they now embark on the process of matching. Matching this parent with a child. During this process of matching, a child who is identified also has to go through investigations, also assessment. They have to assess the background of this child, the history of this child. Again, the purpose of this assessment is so that they can ascertain that this child is free and available for adoption. Now, this step is very crucial because now the Children's Act 2022 has introduced an option or a section, that is section 190, that introduces the review of adoption orders. Previously, adoption orders were final and nothing could be done to undo it.
From the court?
From the court. After you complete this process, before there was no review, there was no option for review or anything. Now, there is an option for review. The purpose of this review or the issue of review comes up, let's say this child had been lost, or abducted. And this parent ensured that they followed all the steps and procedures. They reported this child was missing, investigations were done. They were not able to find this child at that time. But at this now particular point, they've been able to identify this was our child who was lost or abducted. But now it happens that the child has gone through the process of adoption, it has been finalized. This biological parent can approach the court to review this adoption. And the court can review it, and there are two options here. The court can review either to can review this adoption, remove this child from the custody of the adoptive parents and place them with their biological child, parent, or order that this biological parent and the adoptive parent to have joint custody. Yes. Yeah, that's a new one. Yeah, so, and their cases. So, let's say this child, what will make a court to decide that these two parents can share, custody is if this child has been in the custody of the adoptive parent for 5 years. And if this child expresses their wish to continue to be in the life of the adoptive parent. Okay. The reason I got into this section is to, to show the importance of conducting background checks on the child and confirm that indeed the child is free for adoption. So once that is confirmed, all the investigations have been done, the child is declared free for adoption. And then now we go, remember, in the matching stage. And then now we go into the next stage, which is the introduction. So the Adoption Society introduces this applicant or applicants to this child. They're introduced to the child, and now they are taken through a process called bonding. And this is still done when the child is still in the home, whichever home. So that now the child can get used to this, this new individual who wants to come into their life, and even also the parents can get used to the child and know how to deal with the child. This is just for a short period, and then now finally when everyone is comfortable, now the child is placed with the applicant or applicants for a period of 3 months, minimum 3 months. And this is one of the requirements before a child can be adopted. Minimum of 3 months, the child is placed with this applicant or applicants. And then once these 3 months are concluded, now this applicant or applicants can move to the next stage, which is now to us, the lawyers, okay? Now with the lawyers are required now to file an application in court so they can go through the legal process. When this application is filed in court, there are certain, there's certain information that this applicant or applicants has to give to the advocate to enable them prepare this application and file it in court. One of them, they have to provide a guardian ad litem, an individual known as a guardian ad litem. So this guardian ad litem acts as the voice of the child during the whole process of adoption. This guardian ad litem will investigate, the home circumstances of these applicants, look into the child and ensure that the best interest of this child is upheld during the hearing. So once that individual is provided, the other individuals to be provided are the legal guardians. This can be an individual or let's say a couple, or it can be 2 people, whether or not they are couples. Okay. Now these individuals are crucial because you need to, the court needs to be assured that in the event that anything happens to these parents who want to adopt the child, that these legal guardians will step in and take in the parental responsibilities of this child. Okay. So you've provided all this information to your advocates. The advocates have prepared the application and it is filed in court.
Wait, guardian ad litem is sort of a devil's advocate. Do you pick one or?
You can pick one. It's not a devil's advocate really, but someone who can, ensure that the interest of this child is protected. Now, the first court attendance is usually for the hearing of our first application. This first application seeks that the court may appoint this guardian ad litem. Okay? Okay. Yeah. So now in this process, when the court will want to know, okay, who is this guardian ad litem? Is it your best friend who will just lie? Is it your relative who will, who is not here for the purposes of protecting the best interest of his child? The court will consider all these things and then grant your prayer, or maybe even refuse to grant this prayer if the court finds it's not in the best interest of this child. Okay. The other prayer in this first application is for the court to order that the director of children's services to assess these parents, conduct interviews and home assessments, and prepare a report. Okay. Usually the children's officer is given 45 days to do, this report, to do the assessments, compile this report. Again, remember, we've appointed the guardian ad litem. The guardian ad litem is also required to conduct the assessments, do the home visits, and prepare a report. Okay. So once this is done, the court usually gives a hearing date. This other hearing date is for the main hearing. Now, during this main hearing, the guardian ad litem is supposed to attend, because remember they were ordered to prepare a report. So they should have filed this report before this main hearing and then attend court on this main hearing. The other person required to attend the main hearing is a representative from the adoption society that declared this child free for adoption. They have to be present in court. The other person or persons required to attend the main hearing is again the applicant or applicants, because the court has to hear from them. Why do they want to adopt this child? What is their motivation and all that? The child is required to also attend. Sometimes, you find the court, it's usually a friendly process. So the court may want, to ask the child a few questions just to see if the child even understands what is going on and all that. The other person required to attend, remember, you picked a legal guardian or 2 legal guardians. They are required to attend. So all these people attend the main hearing. The court hears from everyone. And once the court is satisfied, the court will give a judgment date. The court will give its judgment on whether they approve this adoption or the adoption is denied. On the date of the judgment is issued and an adoption order is given. Okay.
The child gets another name.
Yes. So yeah, all that is stated in the application. In this application you're making, one of the orders is that once the child is adopted, the child will be known as ABCD from whatever name. So this is the name that will reflect on the adoption order that the court gives. Okay. So you've gotten your adoption order. That's not the final step. You can't sit with your adoption order and say, okay, I've adopted this child. Yeah, it's mtoto ni wangu tukae. No. With this adoption order, you have to get a certified one from court, a certified copy of the adoption order. With this certified copy of the adoption order, you can now apply for an adoption certificate. Okay, from the registrar. So there's usually an adoption register. So once you make this application, for them to issue an adoption certificate and put this entry of the adoption into the register. Okay. Okay. So once this is done, usually wait for a few weeks, and then you'll be able to get your adoption certificate. Okay. Again, some people may choose to stop at this stage, but it's advisable you've come this far, just conclude this process. Nunua ng'ombe, yeah. Just maliza. So finish the process and get a birth certificate for this child. Okay. So now, since you have the adoption order, the adoption certificate, you can use these documents. Now you approach the registrar, births and deaths. You apply for a birth certificate for this child so that your name can reflect on this child's birth certificate. Okay. And now this marks the end of the process of this adoption. Now you have the child, you have all the documentation that's necessary to show you've gone through this legal process, and now the child is legally yours.
When you're married to a foreigner, for example, a Kenyan woman married to a British woman, does that complicate things?
Not quite, because this Kenyan woman is a Kenyan citizen. Now, they've been living in Kenya for all this while. Actually, even there is one we are currently working on. So as long as you can show the court, again, the court has the discretion whether to allow or not to allow an adoption. the court will investigate these circumstances. This is usually a married couple that has been staying in Kenya. This foreigner, they've been married for some time. He has bonded with these children, and it is in the best interest of these children for them to, be legally adopted by this foreigner. Then the court can allow such an adoption.
Do you think the system does enough to cure pretenses, like the kid who can't come and act, they are happy? The adoption center can't lie to the court that they have agreed. Do you think there are enough checks to make sure that the kid actually gets the best deal?
The best deal. Also pretenses from the parents.
Yeah,
or from
people can act. You can tell the kid when you're going to court that day just being your best character, so that you're happy.
Okay. I feel like as it is, there are enough checks, because you have to go, remember there's the Adoption Society and all those assessments, the committees sitting to decide. You move to the guardian ad litem, again, they have to do these assessments and interviews. Now we move to the Department of Children's Services. The children's officer has to do again these assessments, and all these three are independent. So yes, I believe that covers